Hey, it's Jason Cunningham and welcome to Save My Business, a podcast dedicated to helping small businesses not only survive but thrive during tough times. And today in episode 1, I've got 2 infamous, which means more than famous, guests on our panel. The first is young Antony Crowther, founder, CEO of New York Minute, one of the finest fast food outlets going around town, with 10 outlets across Melbourne. And his guest, co-star, none other than Mr. Robert Haddad, CEO and co-founder of business and personal wealth advisory firm, The Practice. Gentlemen, Ant, first to you, welcome.
Thank you very much, mate. Very excited to be here.
And Rob, my business partner, good to have you on board, sir.
Yes, glad to be here.
Now today, what I thought we'd really focus on, and the reason we've got you as our guest, is this piece around staying relevant in business, particularly in a market where the demand is shifting all the time. And your story at New York Minute, I mean, you had 10 years experience before you started the business, and you've been in business for 10 years. Your story's amazing. I wonder if you could share with our listeners in 90 seconds or less. No, I'm not joking. Just share a bit of your journey and the pitfalls and the challenges that you've been through.
Sure. So, when I started the business about 10 years ago, it's completely different to what it would be today. In terms of, we had an in-store diner's experience, and that's the expectation you had to meet. We started very small, 8 seats inside, 8 seats outside. I was in Moonee Ponds, and then consumer demand was obviously the growth chart for us. We got too busy in the store, so we built a bit bigger store. Now, when you build a bigger store, you get a slightly bigger set of commercials, your expense sheet's a little bit bigger, your capital expenditure, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we started at rents around about $20,000 to $25,000 gross rents. And by the time we'd grown into a shopping centre at, say, High Point Shopping Centre and some big stores in, say, Carlton and Brunswick, we're up around the $200,000, $250,000 mark for rents.
Wow.
And that makes sense because the demand's there.
Tell me this, sorry to interrupt. How did you feel, your first business in Mount Alexander Road, Moonee Ponds, how much was the rent there?
$20,000 gross rent.
$20,000 a year gross rent to a store, a flagship sort of store in High Point down near the cinemas. How much rent were you paying there?
$220,000.
Wow, so that's a massive increase. Tell me what thoughts went through your mind signing that lease. How did you feel? Were you nervous or were you gung-ho? Tell me what was going on in your mind.
Well, Jace, believe it or not, the process and the journey took care of that for me because I went from a $20,000 lease to a $40,000 on the next site. The next lease I was on an $80,000. We got too busy in that space. The next one we went to $120,000 in Carlton. We got too busy. So it only made sense for us to go to High Point because we were too busy in every space we'd been in now. So it was time for us to take on one of those bigger centres. So I felt comfortable doing it.
Yeah, because I think, so what you're saying, Ed, is that you started off with a small footprint, a small rent, the revenue and the model worked from a margins perspective. You upped the ante, bigger shop, more revenue, it still worked, and you kept reinvesting into bigger stores. So when you got to the High Point store, you thought, oh, well, that's okay. I'll pay that rent because I'm going to make the revenue's going to match. Yeah. And the bottom line is going to be a bigger number if I keep the same margins.
Rob, would you argue that that's a similar trait across many businesses? As they grew, they just took a bigger premises?
Absolutely, because if we go back to what Ant was saying at the beginning, it was an in-store dining experience.
Yeah.
So it was built around what the customer wanted, and when Ant opened up 10 years ago, what the customer wanted to take the family out or wanted to get out of the house, go in, sit down, be comfortable, and in order to be able to accommodate that clientele, you needed to have more seats.
Yeah. So, Ant, excuse my ignorance, but when I think about this in-store experience, fast food, takeaway type model, selling hamburgers, first comes to mind McDonald's, then Grilled, Hungry Jack's. How did you compete in a market like that with such powerhouse businesses that you were competing against?
It's a good question. It's Macca's and that we don't really we compete against because they're more of that convenience drive-through, much quick. So they're more of a fast food option. We live in the QSR space, so definitely Grilled's relevant to us. And for us, exactly the same as I guess Grilled, Nando's or Snitz or anybody else playing in that tier 2 QSR space, you would need to make sure you got a relevant product, you're priced well, etc., and you got a point of difference in the market.
I'm
And when
sure
we came
taste is something to do with it as well.
Absolutely. So the point of difference for us was we did Philly cheese steaks, pulled pork, brisket on a roll. We smoked our own meats, made our own sauces. So we were a little bit different. So we offered the consumer something that wasn't existing in the market.
Can I ask the same question of Rob? So Rob, similar question. When you first made the decision to leave your employer and start a business, an accounting firm and an advisory firm, obviously there were big players in the market, KPMG, EY, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then second tier, third tier, fourth tier. What did you say as your centerpiece? What was going to be the defining difference between your offering and your competitors?
Yeah, good question. So it's about service, because I think a lot of professionals think that their game is about being a good lawyer or being a good accountant. Whilst, yes, you still need those skills, you're in a service industry.
Yeah.
So being in a service industry means you answer the phone when it rings. When someone rings you, common courtesy, you call them back.
Yeah.
So a lot of those bigger firms can't handle that kind of relationship piece. And so for me, it was about servicing clients and being available when they needed you. Taking on things for them, doing things that are outside the norm.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, the convergence piece around the expectation of what they would come to you for. So, 24 years ago, you weren't speaking about accountants, you were talking about who's your tax agent.
Yeah.
The language has changed.
Yeah.
And, the tax agent they got interchange for the accountant. And the questions that the accountant was being asked are more around legal, money, what do I invest in, how do I finance things, whereas 20 years ago it was about, well, can you do this piece of work for me?
Yeah, and how quickly can you get it done?
Yeah, so our industry has changed. Yeah. Not dissimilar to the food industry.
Yeah. Well, we're service-based as well.
Yeah.
So one of our core principles for me was we don't have the word no in our business. That it helped us make sure that we would appeal to all of the needs of service the customers that walked into our stores.
So let me walk you back, Ant. You started business off in Moonee Ponds, you grew to another store, grew out to Carlton, you went to High Point, you went here, there and everywhere, and you grew your footprint. And the model was around relatively quick service food that tasted great, and there was a lot of in-house dining.
Yep, correct.
Something changed.
It did, 2017.
What happened?
Changed quick. Delivery aggregators, so...
A delivery aggregator is someone like Uber.
So before Uber, there was Fedora and Menulog, but they didn't really have a lot of the market space. Like the market share was still an in-store dining experience. When Uber came, they challenged the market significantly.
Now, Ant, did you have any warning? Did you know this was coming, and did you see it from overseas, or what happened?
Yeah, Jace, we did, but I reckon the food industry understood how quickly it was going to come.
Yeah.
So there was already market players here. But every time they approached me, I wasn't interested at 28% commission because I didn't feel the need for the extra revenue at that commission. It didn't make sense on a P&L point of view at the time.
So for our listeners, the 28% commission, are you saying that the delivery providers would charge you 28% of? So if someone made an order for $100, they would charge you $28 to deliver that.
Correct. Not just deliver it. They provide the customer, obviously the data.
Yeah.
And then we get the order through to the kitchen, and they provide the delivery service as well. So there's a few segments that they provide rather than just
a driver. Yeah.
But you know what I don't understand, Ant? You say in 2017, but we've been getting our pizzas delivered for a while before that, and that became the norm in the pizza space, didn't it?
Rob, I think it's such a really important point, and a lot of people probably don't even consider that. Historically, delivery was centered around pizza and sort of maybe Chinese to a point, right?
Yeah.
That's culturally sort of what we were familiar with. People, when you talk about familiarity and culture, it's really important to understand how quickly Uber shifted that culture and familiarity.
Right.
So once upon a time, there was those two options would be sort of the norm. You're going to wait maybe 45 minutes. You might wait an hour for your food. Yeah. And that was okay.
Yeah.
But we sit down, we're watching the footy.
You order an hour earlier.
Yeah, exactly. You don't psychologically, you're not even thinking about it to the same level you would be if you're sitting in a restaurant. However, what Uber did is they shifted that mentality very quickly because they were able to reduce the time at which it arrived at your house by up to 30 minutes.
Wow.
Up to 40 minutes. So all of a sudden, what they turn around to the consumer and says, you can press one button and open up our platform, and then when you open up our app and get on our platform, you can choose from any number of different food offerings.
As opposed to the pizza shop that had their own delivery driver. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that we got accustomed to our pizza's being delivered, and we got accustomed to it taking an hour to get it.
Yeah, whatever the service was.
Yeah, and because it didn't spread beyond, say, pizza and maybe a bit of Chinese, we thought it wouldn't spread. A bit like in the taxi space where there was talk of the deregulation of the taxi license industry. There was talk for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and people just got complacent that it's never going to happen. But then when it happened real fast.
Yeah. And that's the problem. It happened to the food industry as quick as it happened to the taxi industry.
Yeah.
Within 8 months of Uber arriving, and they had some really key strategies compared to some of the other delivery aggregators. I'll just quickly go through them because it shows you how clever the business structure is.
Yeah.
For them to absorb the market share, what they did was they offered a no delivery fee. So when they came into the market, no delivery fee. They offered us, as from a retail point of view, they offered us a 20% commission. So naturally it made sense to us to acquire more business, and it's on a radius 3 kilometres to your store. It only made sense because it worked on a P&L. So no delivery fee, 20% commission, and what they didn't have at the time was a minimum order spend. When all of the other ones had a delivery fee, a commission that was nearly 10% more than that, and they had a delivery fee. So the consumer hadn't found its way to that. All of a sudden, Uber came in and offered those categories on that service. We were getting cans of Coke delivered from our store at the same price of what it would cost you to come and pick it up from the store. So you imagine how quickly you change the mindset of that customer.
And their behaviour.
And that's the next point. So their behaviour, then people say, well, what does that look like? Give me an idea what that looks like. Within 8 months, 50% of our total company revenue was on their platform, and we'd gone from 20 to 22 to 25 to 28 to 30% commission.
Wow. In 8 months' time.
In 8 months' time.
So let me ask you this quick. So just so I'm clear, right? So your 50% of your revenue had shifted from people coming in and picking it up themselves to being delivered by a third-party provider, and you were getting charged 30% comm. That would be a dramatic impact on your bottom line.
And you're 100% right, Jace. I'll show you how significant that was. So just say an average business turns over $1 million in revenue, total revenue. If 500,000 of that, which is 50%, is on a delivery aggregator at 30%, it means you're giving $150,000 to the aggregator. At $150,000 over your $1 million of revenue, you've just added 15% to the bottom line of your P&L.
Expense.
That used to be profit. So a business that turned over $1 million, that would once upon a time net somewhere in the vicinity of around about the 150K mark, you're giving that 150K to Uber now.
So through my experience,
we had massive challenges from a food industry point of view.
It depends on which way you look at this, Rob, because what I've found in my experience is that as a general rule, mankind, human nature, we don't change our behaviour unless we're forced to, right? Now, if you have a look at various different behaviours of mankind, human nature, you know, for a lot of us, we put on a kilo or two every year. We don't do anything until you're significantly overweight, have a heart attack, have a health issue. You have challenges in your relationship at home. Nothing happens until you get divorced or something happens, you know. It's very rare that we change our behaviour because we have the discipline to do that, even though we know we should, until we are forced to change. And now, today's environment, we've had conversations offline about this, that along come a thing called coronavirus or COVID-19, and because you've had the experience of being forced to change your behaviour, you're actually sort of ready for this change.
Sure, we are. And it's interesting that you explain it like that because it's radical, the change. And that's what we didn't see, Jace. When we didn't put on a kilo every week for 6 months. We watched 8 months.
You put on 40 kilos overnight, and you were forced to do something or have a heart attack.
Mate, exactly. I turned around to my franchisees and said, until I can fix this problem, nobody pays royalty payments. We don't have marketing anymore at the moment. We've got bigger problems that we need to worry about. So we did a whole health check of the whole company then. So imagine triage, and I considered our business being in the Alfred, sitting in the emergency ward, bleeding to death, and I just surrounded the table with as many geniuses as I could.
Now that's what I want.
None of us could come up with an answer as to what and that was everybody in that space that I could think of that could help, and nobody knew what to do.
This is what I want to ask you both, right? This is what I want to ask you both. So there's a lot of people listening today that have been blindsided by the changing landscape that has been created by coronavirus. A lot of people have been blindsided by it. And it's across many industries, you know. It's not just hospitality. It's not just events businesses. It's not just indoor trampoline businesses. I spoke to a mate of mine who runs a panel beating business, and you think, hey, panel beating, that hasn't been impacted, but it has, because no one's driving, no one's having car accidents, right? And therefore, not car accidents aren't good unless you own a panel beating business, but that business has been impacted. My question to you is how, in your time when you got blindsided per se by Uber, how did you have the mind space to make changes? And I ask the same thing to you, Rob. In your experience as an advisor to thousands of businesses, what are the first few steps one needs to do to see if they can not only survive, but then subsequently thrive through a change in circumstances in their business?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the first one is actually recognising you've got a problem.
Uh-huh.
And so I think in your instance, Ant, was that having the franchise model and being able to actually spend time analysing what the stores are doing, you have a tendency in a franchise model to be able to be more across the numbers. So with clients that...
Why do you say that, Rob?
Well, because you've got to report the numbers.
Right, okay.
And so
you're being held accountable?
You're held accountable.
Yeah, right.
So you have to be able to report the numbers, and then you've got head office who's actually looking at the numbers.
Yeah. So what happens if you're not in a franchise business? How do you follow that model then?
Yeah. So that's where the risk is.
Yeah.
The risk is that it's up to the owner to have the discipline to understand where they're at.
Yeah, right.
And in a lot of small businesses, the owner is knee deep in the business, doing it.
Uh-huh.
That the paperwork for the tradesman, for example, happens at night if he could be bothered.
Yeah.
He's got to get up at 5 o'clock the next morning, so
right.
it doesn't happen.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right? So they're not actually analysing what's happening in the business to recognise there's a problem, i.e. I'm not making enough money here, or why am I not having any money left in my bank account?
So you're saying to me the first 2 points is, number one, recognise you got the problem. Number two, diagnose the problem.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And so the problem with that in itself is if the problem's going on in a business and you haven't been able to recognise it, month 1, month 3, month 6,
It's doubled
month
down
12, the problem's getting worse.
down.
Yeah, right.
Right, so all of a sudden, you could, by the time you actually recognise there's a problem,
it could be too late.
It could be too late.
Right. Okay. So all right.
In
so
a lot of instances, it is too
It
late.
is.
yeah. So you're saying, Rob, because one of the benefits of being in a franchise model is you're forced to be accountable to the master franchisor, and you're saying even if you're not in a franchise, you should be being forced to be accountable. And you're obviously speaking from an accountant's bias, respectfully. I'm an accountant too, but you're saying that the numbers are very important.
Absolutely. If you don't know where they are, you can't massage your business to grow.
Okay, so let me ask you both this question. So let's say you've managed to hit the first 2 stages. You've recognised the problem, you've diagnosed the problem, you've got your financials up to date. What's step 3 then? How do you then get to that point? Because, I keep bringing business back to this health mindset, right? And business has got to do, a lot of it's got to do with the 6 inches between your ears. How do you get yourself into the mind space and in the head space when you think that it's all lost because my revenue's dropped from 100% down to 20%, or my expenses in your instance have gone up? How do you get yourself into that mind space of clear thinking to develop a plan to move forward?
It's such a good way of putting this. Because when you find yourself in a position of stress of that level, it's very rare, and emotional stress as well. Most people won't have the emotional intelligence to find that presence of mind to think through them positions with that sort of method. I guess I'm a bit lucky in this regard, Jace. I've sort of always had the ability under stress and under pressure to identify where we need to be and how we need to be there. So,
and that's what makes you a good football coach, because a lot of coaches, and we know each other through football as well, a lot of coaches, I wouldn't be a good coach because I'd potentially panic in that scenario, whereas you have got that ability to have that level head and to be clear. So let me ask you this then. You've got that skill set. What about all the people that are listening that don't have that skill set?
It's crucial to make sure that you surround yourself with people that... The consultants or the groups that you surround yourself with are crucial to your outcomes.
Absolutely.
And if you don't surround yourself with the right people... And I've said this many times. I keep saying this to everybody that I'm connected to. I say to them, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you need to place yourself in rooms where it's okay that you don't understand your accounting, go and get a really good accountant who understands your numbers. If you don't really know where you need to be with your leasing, there's nothing wrong with going seeking out independent help for someone that can help you with understanding what sort of commercial deal should I be engaging in here.
And this is where
I reckon you guys can be amazingly helpful to a lot of the different industries.
This is see, often, Rob, and you'll be one to attest to this. Often, our strength can also be our weakness or our blind spot. And a lot of business owners have the nous and the skill set to be, hey, I can do this on my own. But sometimes you need to drop your ego and lower your guard and bring in an expert. And people would say to me, gee, Jay, you've built an amazing, successful business at the practice. You're 24 years in. You've done so well. I said, no, I haven't. I said, we've done well. I know myself personally, I could never have built this business on my own. I always needed someone that I could bounce something off. And I think we're successful, we're lucky is that Rob and I have got each other. There are a lot of business owners out there that don't have a business partner or a significant other to bounce things off.
So true, that was me.
Yeah. So Rob, let me ask you this question, right? It's easy when things are going well and you're winning new work and you're delivering to your customer and you're high-fiving. How do you change your mindset when your back's up against the wall? What is it that you've done that's enabled you to have a clearer head to develop a plan moving forward?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate enough that I don't fall into that panic category. When we started a business with no money and no clients.
Yeah.
So definitely day one, we had our back against the wall.
Yeah, right.
So that's not anything that's new to me, that phenomenon of being, behind the eight ball or being under pressure. So that's not really the problem. I
For
think
you?
For me.
Yeah.
I'm really onto it early.
Yeah, right.
And so a lot of the time my issue is actually trying to convince others around me that there's a problem because they can't see it yet.
Yeah, right. And why do you think you're onto it early?
Well, again, it's that numbers piece.
Yeah.
So it's that margin piece. It's that understanding what's shifting.
Yeah.
And it's also a bit of industry knowledge too
100%.
about knowing what's going on around you and what's happening in your game. And when we're advising clients, a lot of the times we're onto something before they are. And because they're still making their repayments on their Porsche and they're still going on their 2 holidays a year and, the wife's getting the handbags and the boat's fine, they don't actually think they've got a problem.
Yeah.
It's only until they are struggling to make those repayments that they're concerned what's going on here.
Goes back to what you were saying before.
Yeah.
We wait until it's too late.
Too late.
Wait until it's too late.
Absolutely.
Can I make one point about, I was by myself and I was fortunate as well, Jason, in this regard. I had a chap named Jesse Martin who used to do a lot of the marketing and advertising for the state Labor government at the time. And I used to see him going off to work and that's when I first opened Mini Pond. So I'm doing 100-hour weeks for less than $1 an hour, sleeping on a single bed mattress out the back of the shop.
Yeah.
So everyone has to go through those challenges. And I think it's really healthy to go through those challenges because that, I think, builds a resilience and a bit of grit in that you need.
Yeah.
So Jesse, I was very fortunate with Jesse because I knew nothing about marketing. I knew nothing about advertising. And he taught me so much. So that consultant that you're talking about from an offer and a specialist in that field, because be careful with consultants. I think there's a lot of people out there today that offer a service.
But have no experience.
So you've got to try and make sure there's nothing wrong with going and seeking out 5 different consultants before you choose the one that you think fits you the most.
If there's one thing
crucial.
If there's one thing I can share that I think is common amongst you both. Now, I've known Rob for 42 years and I've known you for over 10 years. And if there's one thing I think is quite similar, is the fact that you can leave your egos at the door. Now, what I mean by that is if people don't know you as well as I know you both, people might say that your egos are healthier than most. But in actual fact, you both do have that ability to leave your ego at the door. And Rob, I turn to you on the back of what Ant has just said around surround yourself with great people like he did with Jesse, the marketing guru. Tell me and share with the listeners, what have you done and who have you surrounded yourself with? What other mentors? I know when we first went into business, you maintained a strong relationship with your previous employer.
Yeah.
Tell me, who else have you done that with and where do you draw inspiration and knowledge from?
Yeah, well, I think that it's one of those things that people sometimes underestimate about who's around you. I mean, in the early days, we started a business with no money and no clients.
Yeah.
Yet I'd have clients of my previous employer that wanted to join us and I wouldn't take them.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be poaching his clients. Now, 24 years on, I still break bread with him.
Yeah.
We had lunch a few weeks ago.
It's great.
And that relationship to me was so important because not only was he a mentor, but he was a bit more like a father figure who actually wanted to see me succeed. And along the journey, I was often faced with issues and problems that I had no idea on how to solve, or even had any ideas how to get through. Being able to pick up the phone was way more valuable than taking that client who wasn't happy with him or thought they could get it cheaper with me.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one. But you hear it so often with successful people when you delve deeper into them around, building a team around them. It's accounting, it's lawyers. It can sometimes be your competitors as well. And I think that sometimes people forget that your competitors can actually be your allies.
Yeah.
Because, it's not like you're taking food out of each other's mouths. The marketplace is so big that you can actually learn from each other.
Yeah.
And
It's such a fantastic point.
Yeah, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah.
Most of my learnings come from my competitors.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
fact, nearly all of my learnings come from my competitors.
Yeah.
Whether it's deliberate collaboration or not, there's so much to learn.
Often it's not collaboration because I don't want to share. It's just the ability to understand why they're doing so amazingly well. Can I make a point just on that? Because this is really crucial. If we go back to when Uber really when that 15% became as a category on the bottom line of our P&L, we had our first real challenge. Since we started New York Minute, all of a sudden then I started thinking to myself, wow, we've got some serious challenges here. I've got franchisees that have got their mortgages on the line. I've got wives in front of me crying, and I'm trying my best to say, all right, what's a solution here that I don't have?
Yeah, that's
not to
so
say that I'm not going
daunting.
to seek it out, but I sit there and say to them this: if I can't fix this, you'll pay me nothing, and I'll shut the franchise down because there's not much else I can do.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't satisfied with that. So my journey started to say, well, how do I fix this? How do I absorb a 30% commission and put back that 15% that's been lost? It was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life, but I'm glad I did it because we thrive in that industry today.
So tell me, what did you do?
Believe it or not, what I did was I looked at a lot of the other food service providers in my category, and Nando's had closed 55 stores, and Subway had closed like 110, and then I'm looking at, Benny's Burgers, which is, we've got some celebrity chefs that have got some fantastic products and fantastic models, but they're just at the wrong time. It's the only problem. You've introduced a model at the wrong time, and it's about the model. And the product was fantastic. And then so I'm looking at all these different competitors, and I'm thinking they're all in the same space as me. It's not exclusive to us. We're all got the same challenge. Everyone I speak to. Stumbled across Dominos. I'm thinking to myself,
it's a good share to own.
how does Dominos record share profits and record shareholdings while the rest of the food industry is kneecapped? So it made me just dig into Dominos. And I am talking really dig into Dominos. Because I don't have to dig far when I look at the food. No disrespect to Domino's, amazing company, but let's be honest, their food's not the greatest. I would say that, and I studied nutrition, so I wouldn't say. But I make burgers. So. What do you do? You guys want to put mixed together? You have the food on the table for the kids. So what do you do? So anyway, I'm not criticising Domino's because I love them. I fell in love with Domino's very quickly.
I'm in love with the share price.
Wow. I looked at the reasons as to why they are. For the last 5 years prior to Uber arriving, they had been talking convenience while the rest of the food industry were all talking about the provenance of their food, and we're all telling the same story. Our marketing and our advertising, we're all down the same lane. We're, different products, similar, like for like, much of a nut, just all about service, etc., etc. And
But 5 years before, they were all on convenience.
Domino's, you mean?
Domino's,
100%. So Domino's had started that journey of talking to their customer all about convenience. So they were the number one delivery platform in this country. Then Uber arrived. Domino's, for about the first 12 months of Uber being in this country, not on their platform. So it tells me maybe we set up our own delivery network. I did that. Couldn't sustain it. We don't have 33,000 drivers on the road in Victoria. The competition for the rates, they've got subcontract drivers. We've got award rate. So
you couldn't handle 30 orders at the same time and get them there.
It was impossible. So logistically, it was a nightmare. It just didn't work. So
unless they all lived in the same street. But anyways,
100%. So we scrapped that idea. So then it came down to going, okay, well, let's not try and be Domino's that way because we can't do that. And this is where I was talking about culture and familiarity. Domino's were providing a service within 15 to 30 minutes. Everybody else in the delivery space was providing a service that took 30 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, and that was okay.
Yeah.
What Uber came in and did, they come in and did the Dominos, but for any product you like on that platform. So that was where our first big challenge was. So I was like, tried to fight off Uber at the start. Then I had to learn to love them quickly.
Yeah.
Found Domino's, which was a blessing.
Yeah.
Because Domino's taught me they're all about convenience, call to action. If you have a look at their website, compared to any other food retailer website, completely different.
Yeah.
Everything's about call to action. So then I looked at it and I said, all right, so how do we become the Domino's of burgers? And we need to become very quickly. Because right now I've got people sitting in front of me crying.
Yeah, losing money. Yeah.
So what I did was I put my expense sheet. How's the best way to put this? So we looked at our P&L and it didn't work.
Yep.
That model needed to change significantly. So I said, all right, what's the future model look like? The future model for me said it can't be New York Minute anymore. So if we imagine the cell in the middle of our revenue stream now is no longer New York Minute, that's Uber.
Yeah.
Because Uber obviously provide the customer, they provide the marketing now, and they provide the delivery service, and that's what the customer wants.
Yeah.
So that's what they told me. So once I'd done that, I looked at it and I said, okay, let's put Uber in the middle, and then New York Minute just becomes a revenue stream. So then I developed a couple of other retailers. You know, I established a couple of new brands and ran them out of the same kitchen. So then allowed me then to have that cell divided
share
in
costs.
half. Well, allowed me to divide that cell in half and have additional revenue streams. So that was the first real
And what
big
were the
fix.
what are the other products or the other offerings that you put?
Oh, we just looked at the industry and had a look at what spaces
Chicken.
we had a look at the industry and had a look at what spaces lived in that market, and we just made sure we played in that space.
Yeah.
Now, me being a chef and I actually build these stores from the ground up. I knew how to introduce these products into that kitchen without increasing the labour, because that was crucial.
Yeah.
There's no point introducing
Back to your
a new
profit and
revenue.
loss statement.
100%. So once we divide that cell in half, the other side was an expense sheet. So what we did was we had a health check of our expense sheet. Everything from our commercials through to our pantry list, we renegotiated every single element of our expense sheet on the other side. So by the time we finished with the model, we came back to a model that, again, it's all about Uber in the centre, that now thrives under a delivery category.
So you put that 15% that
put
got
it back
taken
in.
off your bottom line, you put it back on your bottom line.
Correct.
And so,
But there's one problem here, Rob.
yeah.
When we had 5 stores, we had 120 staff. We now got 10 stores and we've got about 45 staff.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So there's bigger challenges to come out of this.
Yeah.
You know, like,
But interestingly enough, both of you have spoken about the same thing, but using different language.
Yeah.
Both have spoken about the financials.
always the numbers.
Yeah, always. So always starts with the numbers. And interestingly enough, both of you have spoken about the importance of providing the service to your customer.
Well, we just heard a story that was about learning what to do from his competitors and learning what not to do
Absolutely.
from his competitors. And a lot of the times the blessing is both ways.
Couldn't agree more.
But I think the other thing that I found quite interesting is the old management accounting approach to businesses is using a thing called the balanced scorecard, which focuses on the 4 pillars of your business: your people, your processes, your customers, and your financials. I think what's interesting also is you've spoken about another party, and that's your stakeholder, the people you pay money to, and in your case, Uber. It's a stakeholder. Not often business owners will look at their customers and reward them. They'll look at their people and reward them, and they'll refine their processes, but they don't necessarily look at the people that they pay money to. Now, Rob, I know you're big on this, particularly around the stakeholders at the practice being our IT providers, the landlord, and the relationship you've got with them. Can you just share with our listeners the importance of working those relationships and being on the same page with your stakeholders?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just like we pride ourselves on relationships with our clients, that our suppliers are stakeholders as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, even in our business, it is the landlord. He's a key stakeholder in our business. You know, we've gotten to the point where we're very fortunate enough that we know them and know them well, that we actually break bread together. And I often get asked about how can he improve the building.
Yeah.
It's not because he sees me as some expert, but because we've got a relationship of trust now.
That's what I wanted to talk about, the relationship piece. And Rob, it's no surprise that this is a 10-story building and we've got the naming rights of the building. It's known as the practice building. Yeah.
That sort of helps. And it's
but it's based on your relationship with the landlord.
It wasn't the sole objective of being able to build a relationship was to get our name on the building. It was about building a relationship because we see them as key stakeholders. Just like we want to build a relationship with all our suppliers, because guess what? We're here to help each other.
Yeah.
Right? They've got a business and we've got a business. And so much has come, just out of that one relationship. especially when it comes to feedback. So again, if you've got a relationship and it's valued on trust, you'll ask for feedback because you know you're going to get honesty.
Yeah.
Right? Now, an example of that in this instance, especially with the landlord, was asking about the building.
Yeah.
And so I gave some feedback that we've got the beautiful parks around us here, the facilities, the end of trip facilities for people that ride their bikes. There's no bike shed. It's unsafe. People don't want to ride their bikes. They can't ride and exercise at lunchtime. And our end of trip facilities, they don't cater for it. Well, a complete renovation was done on end of trip facilities. And strangely enough, our team and our staff love them and use them. But more importantly, there is not one vacant piece of square meterage in this building.
Yeah.
So there's 2 people that have won out of that.
Yeah, that's right. And also now we use it as part of our our employee value proposition when we talk to our new team members that want to join our business. State-of-the-art end-of-trip facilities is a big selling point for the new team members.
Which is what Anthony was talking about in that, when you're talking about suppliers.
They're partnerships.
Yeah, you're in partnership with them.
It's a fantastic philosophy.
Absolutely. If you get a batch of meat that wasn't the best, rather than going to look, if you've got a relationship with them, wouldn't they expect for you to make a telephone call?
It's such a fantastic relationship. Can we stay just on the landlord for 1 sec?
Yeah.
Because the landlord in this space of our delivery network and the crippling of the food industry, he had a lot at stake as well.
Oh, yeah.
So he had an enormous amount of exposure. So in those conversations, which I explained on the opposite side from an expense sheet point of view, I explained to the landlord ways in which he can keep his square metres by just showing him ways to adjust the model. No single site, single revenue stores anymore.
Yeah.
Let's co-tenant them.
Yeah.
Let's share. Let's find a way to keep your spreadsheet where it needs to be, but not put too much pressure on us. And that's why when you're talking about the sharing of IP, and IP might be just the landlord and the business owner.
Yeah.
That's one of the partners. And then the distributor. You've got to bring the distributor into this conversation as well and figure out ways that we can make sure that the distributor gets his earn as well, because everybody needs to eat.
Absolutely.
And those relationships are so crucial. But if you can get them all in the same room and have that conversation, you'll find that, which is no different to consultants, you'll find that you'll always end up in a far better place if you're thinking not just about yourself.
And this is we're coming to the end of our podcast, and this is a really pertinent point. I want to touch on this, and there's one other question I'm going to ask you both.
Sure.
But this point, we've been at the forefront of having conversations with a number of clients, thousands of clients, over the last 3.5 months during this financial crisis and economic crisis that was caused by a health crisis. And watching it from a distance, but also at the front line, I've seen our behaviour, mankind's behaviour change from right at the start when the market got belted, and the market came off, the Australian share market came off 35%, and people were making contact with us about their own investments, and it was very me. A few weeks later, we were in the supermarket and we were quite barbaric and fighting over toilet paper and baked beans and 2-minute noodles. Then the next wave was about, we're in this together. How do we share the load? And I've heard that come through quite a bit with both of you. It's about this whole, we're in this together. It's about a relationship piece. It's not so much how do I make the most money, it's how do I help my franchisees? How do I work with my landlord? How do I work with my stakeholders and my providers and my team members? And knowing that if there is anything, it's got to be win-win. It can't be win-lose or lose-win.
Well, it comes back to that focus on what you're going to give and what you want to get will come. And what we're hearing about here in summary is what you've heard from Anthony, the story, is I don't want the blessing and the message to get lost. We have a growing business that gets built and scaled up for a model that says the customer wants to come and sit and eat in my home.
Yeah.
My home being your store.
Yeah.
So therefore, I need 100 seats. I need 150 seats. Yeah. And I call it the $1 million fit out. Fit out a commercial store, $1 million. Right? So I've gone from that model to no one wants to come and eat in my home. They want to eat in their own home.
Yeah.
And now I've got 150 seats that are empty.
And all you have to pay commercial rates for those square metres.
Absolutely.
And you're locked into those tenancy agreements with director's guarantees.
Yep.
Yeah. Usually what's attached to your director guarantees, your personal guarantee.
Your home.
So we can show a lot of people the maze at which we can show them how to sidestep a lot of these landmines in the future because now there's opportunity.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the people that are in this position now that are struggling, I reckon they're the ones we can help the most.
And this is why the landlord's important.
100%
Because
is crucial.
It's crucial because what the landlord will be re-educated on, and I think you'll see this in the future, whereas it'll be the smart ones that get onto it early. That 200 square metres that used to be the one shop with 150 seats, the landlord, we need your cooperation to split that into 2
or 3
or 3,
or 5,
where you're still going to get your top line rent, but you're going to get it from 3 or 4 different
with
sources.
much less exposure. You've mitigated his risk.
There you go.
If you lose one tenancy, it's always easier to lease out a space for 40 grand than it is to lease out a space for 140 grand. There's so many conversations that need to be had. We should have another conversation about the industry, won't we?
No doubt we will. I'm going to leave us with one final comment if I can, and we'll sum it up. My experience tells me that most successful people that you get to meet have always had a challenge or two and have been faced with adversity. And typically, there's a saying, nothing is ever as bad as it seems right now, nor will it be ever as grand as you think it might be in the future. And there's, sayings that have been thrown around of late, every cloud has a silver lining and all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't mind touching on 1 or 2 personal experiences if you're comfortable in sharing them. At some times where you faced some real adversity, and I'm going to start with Rob because I know Rob pretty well. But I know Rob before his 21st birthday. His father passed away. And it's a challenge for a lot of people, for any person to lose, your father or a parent. And Rob touched on it earlier when he spoke about his previous employer, whose name is Peter, was like a father figure to him. And at the time, and no doubt right now today, Rob wishes his dad was here with us, no doubt. I'm a person that's lost a parent and I understand the pain that is. But I lost a parent at 45, not at the age of 20. And I wanted to talk to you about that, Rob, and ask you, what have you drawn on from that experience that's helped shape the man and the business owner and the entrepreneur and the leader that you are today?
Oh, the fight. It wasn't just the memories of and the age I was at. It was what actually happened after Dad had gone. We had a mortgage.
Yeah.
And we had one breadwinner in our family that was my dad.
Yeah.
Who was no longer with us.
Yeah.
So when you spoke earlier about issues in business, and I was at 20 years of age, and I had a mortgage, I had a younger brother, and I had a mum who was at the peak of her life, early 40s.
Yeah, but also Rob, share the fact, and I'm delving a bit into Rob's personal life, so just cut me off if I'm going too far. But also the culture that your parents grew up in overseas, and when they came to Australia, right, that your father did everything.
Yeah, Dad did everything, and being the oldest, that sort of gets handed to me. So when you talk about the experience that comes with it, back against the wall. So I had a mortgage at the age of 20.
Yeah.
And I had a mother who was a cancer survivor, couldn't work. So we had no income coming in.
And English was her second language.
English was her second language. And I had a brother who was still going through university.
Yeah.
So pretty much it was about survival.
Yeah.
And so it's easy for me, having that as a background at the age of 20, to look at a business and be in survival mode. Like, I actually don't know any other way. And therefore recognising problems and coming up with solutions is pretty easy for me because at a very young age, I had to work out how we're going to keep our home. So
when you're supposed to be enjoying your life.
When I was supposed to be enjoying my life, yeah. So
most of us are.
At the age of 20, yeah. So
real adversity.
Absolutely, and that's why I don't panic in those situations because there's been much worse.
Yeah, at the age of 20, you're faced with losing your family home.
Yeah. Lost Dad.
Yeah.
And losing the family home.
Yeah.
And trying to keep food on the table.
Yeah.
And so
And you and your brother are big eaters.
Well, absolutely. And so we're no stranger to hard work, and no stranger to adversity. But there's so many blessings that come out of it.
Yeah.
And what you've heard today from Antony is the blessing that come out of it. That now there's a model that he's been able to work through that works. And
share it.
And absolutely. And perhaps you're like the Dominos in the sense that Dominos were ahead of the curve. They were selling convenience before they were selling pizzas.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, hopefully you're ahead of the curve, Ant, by the time your competitors work it out.
That's where we want to be. Domino's, believe it or not, during COVID, hired 2,000 new drivers.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be another food operator that done that.
No.
During COVID, we're 25% up. So I'm blessed and I'm grateful. And look, if you want to ask me just very quickly about one or two real challenges for me, Jace, I reckon.
I'd be keen.
Dear wife, separated. That's why I started New York Minute. I wanted to leave a legacy for my kids. That's why I was happy to do the whole start again process. And that was enough for me. Just leaving a legacy behind for my children to know that sometimes when things don't turn out the way that you expect them to turn out, that's okay. And yes, there might be a time when you're doing quite well for yourself, and then all of a sudden you might find yourself in a position 12 months later where you're not probably doing all that well for yourself, and you've got to have the grit and the grind to be able to get through that process.
Very good word.
Can I just touch on that a little bit more?
Sure.
And just let me know if I'm crossing the line. So you separated from your wife, and that was what gave you the impetus to go into business?
No, I was already in business for 10 years prior. So I closed the business down when we separated. So it was more about starting again and teaching the kids that it's interesting. Whenever we have failures in life, we look at the failure, but we don't look at the opportunity that's on the other side. Because we're so emotionally attached to something. I don't really get that emotionally attached to that sort of stuff because I'm too driven. And I wanted the kids to know that you can still be with a partner for 19 years like I was, and that to me is considered a success. It's not a failure.
Yes.
So what am I going to do with the rest of my life? That's what matters. What legacy the kid's going to see now that they're grown up. And the second challenge, Jace, Uber Eats. Now I love them. I had a thriving business that was on its knees. And now, I'm just happy that I'm very grateful that I can share experiences. But more than anything else, navigate people's pathways through this ever-challenging food industry that's changing so rapidly.
I dare say there's going to be a lot of people listening to this podcast about that are going through a difficult time in the food space because hell of a lot, there's a lot of them that we've been speaking to that don't know the way forward. But I think that hopefully they can draw some solace and some positivity out of that story that, it's not as bad as you think it is. You just can't see the other end of it yet.
Well, that's right. And I think not just for the food industry, I think for a lot of industries. And I just want to thank you both for being our first guests on Save My Business podcast. And your story's amazing. And Rob, you've been a lifelong friend, godfather to my kids, business partner, confidant, best man at my wedding. I mean, he's pretty much done everything.
That is a wonderful story.
Yeah, it is a great story. Robbie and I met at the age of 5. He stopped beating me up when I was 32, which is great. We went to the same primary school. We went to the same high school. We went to the same university. We played footy against each other. We went into business together. I'll never forget, on the 1st of December 1997, we got a little shop front in Ascot Vale Road in Moonee Ponds. We're paying $180 a week in rent. We signed a 2-year guarantee, and we thought we'd signed our lives away. And fast forward today, the business is a lot bigger and a lot stronger. And I guess in summing it up, what I found intriguing and enjoyable was the messages, although spoken from different mouths and through a different paradigm and a different set of eyes, the messages have been the same. It's around the importance of focusing on your financials, irrespective of whether you've got an accounting degree or not. It's about holding yourself to account, whether you do that yourself or have a third party hold yourself to account. It's around who you surround yourselves with, the ability to have a clear head, and if you haven't got a clear head, get someone else to help you get a clear head. And looking at the challenge may not necessarily be the challenge, but it's the opportunity. Antony Crowther, CEO New York Minute, thank you very much. Robert Haddad, CEO of The Practice, thank you very much.
Pleasure, gents.
Thanks,
for having me.
Well done, boys.
Inspiring.
Thanks, Ian.